Hello and good evening to everyone who is joining us here on Zoom for our program, our conversation with Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. We are so pleased you've taken the time to register for this event here tonight. Before we get started, I want to thank, there's a lot of people to thank, but Ashley, the club co-leader, or club leader rather, from the Albany Alumni Club, was one of the key instrumental people in getting this program off the ground tonight. I want to thank her. She'll be speaking in a little bit, giving some remarks about the Alumni Club of Albany, of the Capital District, and how you can get involved with your local alumni club. My name is John Boccacino. I am a proud alumnus of the Newhouse School of Public Communications and soon to be master's holder with a public administration, public policy degree from Maxwell. So I'm a dual degree holder. I love Syracuse University so much that I came back to work for the university. After graduating in 2003, I'm a former journalist and someone who's worked in higher education now for going on 7 years. I love working in higher ed, love working here at Syracuse University and bringing our alumni really informative programs like tonight's conversation with Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. Again, we have a lot of interest in this program tonight. We had a lot of people that submitted their questions for the Lieutenant Governor. We will try to get to your questions as we can with time permitting. We have disabled the chat function for tonight, so our main way of communicating with our participants will be through our conversation points here on Zoom. One of the things we want to do, besides thanking everyone for showing up here tonight for this virtual conversation, if we could have anyone who does not have their name properly changed to show your class year and your first and last name, that'd be great for our record keeping purposes. It also rewards our alumni with points for our alumni engagement scorecard. You get credit for showing up to our events, and we really appreciate keeping accurate records of our alumni who have showed up for our programs. I just changed my name by using the 3 little dots in the upper right next to your name. You can select that, go down to rename and put your first and last name and class year in there, because again, we're all Syracuse Orange alumni. Let's figure out who we are and have a good idea for the faces and the names that are joining us here on this Zoom program. I know that we are looking forward to virtual programs moving forward. We're also looking forward to doing in-person programming when things are safe. Clearly, it's a dangerous and a risky time right now with the pandemic ravaging all of the country. We want to encourage everyone to keep checking out our virtual programs on alumni.syr.edu/virtual. We post all of the alumni engagement programs as well as club events, again, much like this one here tonight. We have a lot of great offerings for everyone coming up after the new year. We're going to take a little bit of a pause with our programs for the holidays coming up here and then resume stronger than ever in 2021. Speaking of stronger than ever, our club leadership in Albany is doing a fantastic job of connecting our alumni to their alma mater. And I want to welcome on the club leader in Albany, Ashley Ranslow, who is joining us. She is a proud alumna of the class of 2010. Ashley, you're doing some killer work in Albany. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know you and what your goals are with the Alumni Club.
Great. Thank you, John. And good evening, everyone. It's great to see all of you. And we sincerely appreciate you taking the time to join us for this special event hosted by the Syracuse University Alumni Club of Albany. And we are excited that the Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will be joining us soon. John, as John said, we here in the Capital Region just love to connect with fellow alum. I graduated from Syracuse in 2010. As John said, I currently am the New York Assistant State Director at NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business. And I live here in the Capital Region. I live in Niskayuna, New York with my husband, who is also a Syracuse grad. So we have a very orange family. And with that, the Alumni Club in Albany, we're really focused on connecting alum with each other. We hold in non-COVID times, we typically hold networking events and game watching events, but also some really great community service events. And then our favorite event every year, which is the new student send-off, where any high school kids in the region are going off to Syracuse. We put together a little picnic for them and their families. So I really encourage you, if you're in the Capital Region, to get involved with our club. If you're not in the Capital Region and you're in another part of New York State, be sure to check out your regional club and get involved with them. If you do live in the Capital Region, feel free to email me, suinalbany@gmail.com. I can send you more information on any of our upcoming virtual or hopefully soon in-person events once COVID is clear. And also, if you're looking to volunteer or get more involved with the club, you want to help organize events, whether virtual or in person, or just participate at a greater extent with the university, I'm happy to talk more with you about it. Thanks, John.
Great, Ashley. Thank you again for your leadership and getting everyone in touch with their institution of Syracuse University in the Capital District. I want to mention real quick before we welcome the Lieutenant Governor that hopefully many of you received an email this past weekend talking about career services. We are really ramping up our career services offerings through Hire Orange. There's mentoring opportunities. There's opportunities to post jobs if you're looking to hire Orange. We all know one of the best parts about being an alum is the Orange Network and how powerful the 245,000 alumni are around the world. Help share and connect alumni and students with job opportunities that your company might be having by visiting our Hire Orange job resources at alumni.syr.edu. It's a great place to share job opportunities. There'll be cool career coach sessions where you can sign up for one-on-ones and small group sessions to hear from people that are talking about pertinent topics in career development. And really, it's a cool way to extend our opportunities to our alumni during the virtual world of the pandemic. That's one of the, I guess, silver linings of this pandemic is Ashley mentioned that there's people on the Zoom here who are not from the Capital District. And that's awesome. This was extended to all alumni across New York State because during the virtual times of the pandemic, our programs are without borders. Think about how many of you might not have been able to make a program tonight if you had to get home and babysit your kids, if you had to work late at the office, you traveling somewhere after a long day. It can be complicated to make it to some of those programs. With these digital programs, we're really trying to make it as easy as possible for our alumni to connect and engage. And the beautiful part too, we will let everyone know this program is both being recorded and we will post it on the alumni website and the club page afterwards, so that if you happen to have a friend who missed it or you want to recatch what the Lieutenant Governor has to talk about when it comes to the state's response to COVID and her political career, you can revisit that and watch it anytime at your leisure. Speaking of, I believe now I'm looking in the participants room. I believe we are pleased to be welcoming on our special guest of honor, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul will be joining us here on this great program tonight. And Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much for making the time. First of all, I know your schedule must be a little busy and chaotic this time of year, but thank you for making the time to talk to our Syracuse University alumni.
Well, John, thank you for the great opportunity. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. To Ashley, to you and your team and everything you do to keep the family together. Once we graduate, many times people get scattered. They're scattered all around the globe because of the great education they had at SU. But it's nice that we can regroup even in this virtual way. Maybe this could be more of a routine that we'll keep doing this. And I see Mick just joined us, one of my former staffers of my congressional race. So it's a broad network, and I'm happy to see everybody. So I'm looking forward to hearing your questions, John. I know you have a lot on your mind, but I do want to say that as an alum, there is a direct line from my experience at Syracuse University as an activist in student government and student representative to the Board of Trustees, and what I did there and the education I received in the Maxwell School, all the way to me becoming the highest ranked female in state government today. So I don't think a week goes by where I don't give a speech where I mention my Syracuse experience and how profoundly it changed me and put me on a certain trajectory that I would not have foreseen before I went to school there. So I do give a lot of credit to Syracuse. I show up there, I swear, I'm on campus probably once a month. I always find some reason as I'm crisscrossing the state to drop in and say hello to the chancellor and some of my friends who are still working there, and to see the transformation of the campus, which is literally unrecognizable from the many years ago that I was there. So I'm looking forward to the questions and appreciate this opportunity. I will just say one more thing is that it was a little tense around my household over the weekend. I'm married to a guy from Notre Dame, and my son went to Notre Dame. So I was hoping the game would kind of end after the first quarter and I could declare victory. And, I was tweeting out about, yay, we're beating Notre Dame. And all of a sudden, then I had to be quiet. But unfortunately, I'm also a Buffalo Bills fan. So I'm a little tired having stayed up late last night to watch my hometown team, the Buffalo Bills. They play not far from where I grew up in Hamburg. So it all comes back to football. That's the connection, the glue that keeps us all together.
It does, boys. Sports are a great way for camaraderie. And go Bills, 9-3, a huge win, 34-24 last night over the Niners. I have a bit of the baggy eyes myself from staying up late to watch the primetime game, It was so great. And Syracuse football, look, we have basketball season coming up with Notre Dame. We'll hopefully get to show them who's number one on the court with Jim Boeheim's boys getting some victories over the Irish.
No doubt in my mind. We're going to win those, and I'll be able to, make my husband eat a little bit of crow. I'll tell him basketball is far more important of a sport than football anyhow. So,
well, I know, Kathy, you mentioned tensions, and just to dive right into our program, it's hard. We'd be remiss not to address the 800-pound elephant in the room of COVID-19. We're all here on this Zoom because of COVID. We have not been able to gather in person, and it's hurt us. It's hurt our economy. It's hurt our mental states, just not being able to do the things that we took for granted before the pandemic. A lot of people, and we're going to talk about the road to recovery. We're going to talk about what's been happening with our state, but real quick, could you address the collaborative efforts, how you as Lieutenant Governor have worked with different partners in the state government and across the federal government as well to facilitate this recovery and dealing with this pandemic, which none of us alive have ever seen something like this?
No, you're absolutely right, John. We had to write the book. No one handed us the playbook on how you manage a global pandemic. So the first thing we did was convene experts, not just from New York State, where we have some of the finest individuals at, even at upstate. I traveled many times to upstate to talk about getting their recommendations on what we should be doing. But around the globe, we have experts from Oxford University advising us as well. So you lean into the experts to tell us what needs to happen in terms of literally the shutting down of our economy back in March and April, and then what you do to handle the influx of individuals who are now testing positive in our hospitals, how we handle the surge at our hospitals that was so overwhelming just a few months ago, March, April, and May. And then at that point, you start talking about how we start reopening the economy. So that's what I do as chair of the Regional Economic Development Councils. And there is one in Central New York, there's one in the Capital Region. Every part of the state is represented by members of academia, and the chancellor was chair of Central New York for a little while, so he's involved with that. So we had to talk about the economy and how we could bring people back safely. So I'm often on calls with Washington. Sometimes it was with Pence, Vice President Pence. Sometimes Donald Trump was on the calls to talk to us about their so-called efforts of what they were trying to do. But we realized early on that New York State would really have to step up. And so I work with the governor. I chair the Western New York area response to COVID directly. I live in Buffalo. And so I'm hands-on with our county leaders as well, our hospital leaders. So we're in a different transition now, and it's a whole history. You know the history of what we went through. But now, just so you know what the future brings, we have a winter strategy, which is number one, to get kids back into schools. We realized we didn't have this data earlier, that the schools are much safer places for children than out in the communities. The infection rate is dramatically lower there, and we cannot lose any more time in educating them. We have to make sure our hospitals are all ready for at least a 25% increase in patients. Get ready now for when that does come, if it does come. Also making sure that we address the economic challenges that our community faces and how to deal with the businesses that are suffering. So, and also linking more testing, getting more testing out in the community. So we have a multifaceted approach to how we're dealing with this now, really based on everything we've learned. We did not know this back in March, how it was transmitted, how infectious it is, how it's going to spread. We now know that 70% of cases are being spread in people's homes, which is really counterintuitive since we were all told to stay home early on. But now we realize that people are saying, well, I can't go out to the bar with all my friends and watch the game. I'm going to bring everybody into my house, except in your house, no one's wearing a mask. And so, and you get comfortable with your friends, and my goodness, of course, my brother-in-law would never have the virus. He wouldn't have that, right? Well, it turned out your brother-in-law had the virus, and now everybody at your party is infected. So that's what we're dealing with now. And lastly, I'll say the vaccination is going to be a game changer. We have been waiting a long time. We are actually starting to distribute the vaccine to nursing homes and to our essential workers, healthcare workers first, starting literally December 15th in the state of New York. We're concerned about supplies. Pfizer is the first one to make it available. Moderna is a second. So we're going to be working with the federal government, getting them to the state. The state will be deploying incredible effort. This will be equivalent to a military operation, the likes of which we've not seen since World War II. And this is what we have to accomplish, getting 20 million New Yorkers vaccinated, not once, but twice. That's 40 million doses. And so that's what's on our plate right now. The vaccination process, trying to manage infection rates that are going up. They're going up very high in central New York, the Finger Lakes region, western New York. These are bad numbers. This 7% that we're getting used to seeing now, just imagine, in October, if we were above 2%, all the alarms went off. And now it's 7% on average. So we're in a bad place in some parts of our state. So it's all consuming, John. It really is, it takes up every minute of our days.
I know that, look, and again, the Spanish flu of 1918 was 102 years ago. And, the policies have changed so dramatically from what the leaders back then had to deal with. And you factor in the economic downturn that has taken from people having to close their businesses and restaurants. It's a harsh reality, but New Yorkers are resilient people. We can handle the snow, we can handle the weather that comes our way, and we can handle this challenge that's being thrown our way of trying to get through this pandemic and doing this together. I want to ask you one more question about the pandemic moving forward. Your team and the state has really been pushing hard the efforts to rebuild New York State and making people realize that even though times are really tough now, it's not always going to be that way. What in particular can you tell our audience about the efforts to reopen and rebuild the state's economy moving forward that may give them some peace of mind during these trying times?
Well, that's a great question. And unlike some of our past recessions that can go on for years and years, we really do believe that this is going to be a finite situation, that our economy will come back once we have widespread vaccination. It may not be till next summer, but at least you can see the end in sight. So to our business community, we are hopeful that we can get more money out of the federal government. This plan that they're talking about, the stimulus for $908 billion, that's not going to cut it. We view that as a down payment until Joe Biden, another SU alum, has the opportunity to take over the White House and have his policies implemented. Then we'll get money out to help those businesses that are really just barely hanging on by a thread. So first of all, its immediate focus has to be helping those that are not doing well. Some industries have done phenomenally well. I mean, you think about some of our food and beverage businesses, alcohol consumptions, people are eating and cooking at home. So there's a lot of businesses that are doing well. Bicycle, I trying to get my son a bike for Christmas, and they're, maybe next year. It's just like, and kayaks this summer, everybody was buying a kayak apparently. So it's funny to see the winners and the losers in the economy, but we do know that there's going to be people who will never get their old job back. The companies are going to find out ways to do things leaner for them, better for their bottom lines, means fewer people working. So what you mentioned earlier is at the outset is about the network of SU alums that are out there and the job opportunities. I'm laser focused on apprenticeship programs, getting people who may have been working in restaurants as wait staff. They now may be replaced by an iPad. I was in Ithaca down at Cornell not long ago, and instead in a restaurant outdoors, I picked up an iPad at my table instead of talking to a waiter. So that's changing. Technology's changing. So let's get those people into areas where we know there's opportunity. Clean energy jobs. We need so many people in clean energy jobs. We need people in the trades. We need people in advanced manufacturing. And there's a lot of jobs out there. We can train them to skills. So there'll be a shift, but also just some of the very positive takeaways from this. We have totally reimagined the delivery of healthcare. We have gotten hospitals to collaborate in ways they never did before. The competition went by the wayside, and there's one focus, which is smarter for the cost of healthcare to help drive that down as we find more efficiencies and collaborative efforts. Telehealth services. I mean, number of people who can now get help by seeing a doctor on a Zoom call or a virtual call, or people who need medicated, whether someone's suffering from addiction and they need to get their medication-assisted treatment. There's ways we can treat people with mental health challenges, physical health challenges, all without them leaving their home. So I think the delivery of healthcare is going to be enhanced. I think education is going to improve. Sorry, kids in all over the state of New York, there should never be another snow day. If it's snowing and you can't go to school, okay, kids, 8 o'clock, warm up your laptops again, just like we did during the pandemic. And so we can keep education going. And telework, I mean, just think about the fact that for years there was a stigma associated with people working from home. The assumption was you're not as productive, and the boss can't really watch you. And also you're hindering your own ability to advance because you're not there networking. Now, I don't think this is a permanent way for everybody, but at least it gives families flexibility. If you're a parent struggling who's watching the kids and you can get your work done late hours with a flexible schedule, you can work from home. I think there's a lot of fascinating ways that we're talking about building back better and smarter. based on the lessons we've learned, that we can spin into a very positive approach and let New York State be a leader in reimagining the post-pandemic future.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely things that have changed, policies that are going to adapt and adjust because of this new normal. And really, I've been referring it as a new abnormal because it doesn't feel normal to not be able to be with your family and friends and do what we have to do to quarantine and stay safe during these trying times. But there's valuable lessons to be picked up. And it's great to hear that, we're talking about building the state back better. We know how great this state is and how great it can be moving forward. And that's a good segue, Kathy, into our talk about your role as Lieutenant Governor. How would you describe the role that you play in our state, especially nowadays? You never envisioned this happening when you were elected as part of the ticket before dealing with the pandemic and getting the state through this. But how would you describe the role that you play as Lieutenant Governor in navigating the state through some pretty tricky waters?
What I've realized is that I have an ability through, I trace it back to my experiences speaking at student government meetings, trying to persuade 150 student government representatives to take a certain position, whether it was, hate to say it if you're part of the administration, but we were always petitioning our grievances. Sometimes we were picketing, sometimes we were occupying a few buildings here and there. We were boycotting the bookstore. I would say I lived in a very activist time, and I was one of those people. And it reminds me that when at my 10-year reunion, I was in Washington. I went to a meeting with and saw the chancellor, and he said, 10 years later, we couldn't wait for you to graduate. so I took that. I was kind of proud of that, actually. But in terms of what I do, I can communicate. And so literally yesterday, we hit a milestone of 500 interviews that I've done just since COVID started. And those are just anything from MSNBC to Bloomberg News down to the smallest newspaper, country western, hip hop, top 40 radio. And what I can do is take the governor's message that we frame in terms of what we want the people of New York to know, and so they can understand our process and understand why we're doing what we're doing and how long it's going to take and what it means to them. I can amplify that message all over the state. So in addition to my normal duties as chair of economic development councils all over the state, I continued going to many groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings, very different. We used to have big crowds. Now there's only a few people, all socially distanced, all sitting outside or standing outside in the cold generally. But we are very smart about this because I wanted people to know that despite what's going on, we still have an economy to manage. We want this economy to still prosper, and good things are still happening. Building was still going on, and let people know to have some confidence and faith in it. So I would say I'm really the surrogate and the communicator for our administration nonstop. Every single morning, I have at least 3 to 4 radio interviews, and I'll wrap up at night with television, wherever it may take me. I did CBS internet news yesterday in the middle of the afternoon. So that's the strength I bring. And also I communicate directly with all of our local officials. I think because I've been elected at every level of government, I don't know how many people can say they've been elected to everything except school board. I've been elected at the town level, the countywide, Congress, and now Lieutenant Governor. So I actually understand the language that they speak and what point of view they're bringing to this. So when I'm talking to a county official, I know they're actually thinking like, okay, when is the state going to pay me back for this? Is this another unfunded mandate? I mean, I know what they're thinking because I used to say the same thing. So I think that's the value that I bring to this is my wide knowledge of government, its functions, and how I can play a role during the pandemic, but also just to continue making sure that the work of government continues.
You mentioned earlier you're a lifelong Western New Yorker. You grew up outside of Buffalo. Before being Lieutenant Governor, you were elected to Congress out of your hometown of Buffalo. You've stayed tried and true to Western New York. What does it mean to you to get to represent the fine people of Western New York when it comes to your role as Lieutenant Governor and in government in general?
It's such a high honor, and everyone in Western New York knows me as, I go to Washington or I go to New York City, and it's all Lieutenant Governor, Lieutenant Governor. Everybody in Western New York says, Kathy's here. I'm just like part of the gang. So I know that there's just this sense that, I'm one of them, and I'm an upstater, and I'm the only upstater who represents any level anywhere in state government. All of our other representatives are from New York City. So I feel I have a special connection to not just the Buffalo story, but the Buffalo, West New York story is so similar to the Syracuse story, and the Rochester, and the Albany, and Utica, and Binghamton, and Watertown. I understand this sense of all the focus is always on New York City, And, what about us? No one pays attention to us, because I felt that way for a long time. So I spent a lot of my time traveling, and, not just in Western New York, where I'm spending a lot of time because of COVID, but I literally just this last week hit all 62 counties, even during the pandemic. So I'm out there everywhere. But when I am back home, there's a special sense of pride that I feel to represent them, to say, let them know that they have a very loud voice in state government representing them, and that their needs are not being heard on deaf ears, that I'm out there to represent them.
What was it that drove you into politics in the first place? Where did this passion for service and serving the public sector first originate?
Probably at the kitchen table. You can all Google how old I am, but I'm pretty darn old. Back in 1968, I was, living in a household. My parents they used to live in a trailer park when they were first married, and my dad worked at the Bethlehem steel plant, so we didn't have a lot, but I was taught, that, I was raised in a very Catholic, very progressive Jesuit type family, where they talked about the necessity of all of us to give back. So my parents weren't political, but they were activists in the anti-war movement, in the civil rights movement. They're part of an effort to integrate our all-white communities, and wasn't a very popular position to take at the time. So even when, we lost Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, and Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and we had the tumultuous Democratic convention and the riots in the streets. I was a kid paying attention to all that, because my parents talked to us at the dinner table about it. And I did the March on Hunger when I was probably 12 years old. My parents dropped me off in Buffalo, and I did my first march. And so they gave me a lot of freedom to express myself. And we talked politics all the time about what was happening in our country and how much we despised Richard Nixon and supported Hubert Humphrey. And so I just grew up in that environment. And so I credit my parents for instilling those values and that sense of responsibility to give back. I mean, we're not here just to take up space and on this planet. We have to be working toward a legacy of service to others, and I got that from my parents. My parents did extraordinary jobs in their own lives. My mother started the first Erie County Coalition Against Domestic Violence. She was an advocate for victims of domestic violence back in the 70s, when people called them wife beaters, and there was no real attention to it. It's kind of really hidden under the shadows. My mother went to Albany and lobbied. And so I got all this from my parents, and they were an extraordinary team. And I owe my public service, the desire to serve public service directly from my parents.
Speaking of activism and radicals, 100 years ago, there were a bunch of women who thought it was unfair that they were not able to have the right to vote. And so we got the women's suffrage movement that took place. Oh, sorry, Nikhil, we're going to have, if someone could please mute, that'd be great out there. Sorry about that, Lieutenant Governor. The technology challenges with Zoom, it can always be an interesting
I've been there.
debate to get into here. Yeah, you've done 500 media appearances. You know how it can go. Everything can be planned out very well, and then you have a little hiccup there. But my question, to get to the point, was with the women's rights movement, and Seneca Falls is the home of the Women's Rights Halls of Fame, and you've played an integral role as Lieutenant Governor in celebrating the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which guarantees and protects the right to vote for women. As the chair of the Women's Suffrage Commission, how did the state celebrate this occasion, and why was this issue so near and dear to your heart?
Well, because I know what it's like when women feel that even though we had the right to vote, you're still not treated as an equal. I mean, I was always the only woman in a room most of my life, up until more recently, when I start seeing more women get elective office. Or I was a teenager working at Democratic headquarters. I'd take the bus down for about an hour bus ride, put my 50 cents in, and head down and do volunteer work right after school every day, stuffing envelopes, working with Tim Russert and our county leader, who was also the state chairman. So I knew, and I was the only kid, but also the only female. And so even when I went to a law firm after law school, the only woman in a major DC law firm. So I also know that, there's stories of people who came before me who paved the way. And this was our opportunity to tell those stories. I don't think most people knew that New York State is the birthplace of the women's rights movement. It started even more than 100 years ago, 1848 in Seneca Falls. And I'll tell you, until I was an adult, I never had a chance to go visit these really shrines to the women and the men who stood with them. I mean, you had to be very courageous, either gender, to be standing up for this radical idea that women should be treated equally as men and have the right to vote. Frederick Douglass was one of the most eloquent speakers at the Women's Rights Convention and persuaded people that women should have the right to vote. So there are a lot of stories that I wanted to tell as part of our state narrative, also as a tourism catalyst to celebrate this, but draw people from around the country to literally walk in the same footsteps as Susan B. Anthony and visit her home in Rochester, where she was arrested for having the audacious idea that she should vote. And Seneca Falls is amazing. And down the road is, in Auburn is Harriet Tubman's homestead, who was not just conductor on the Underground Railroad, but a great story, but also she was very much a suffragette. So there are great stories that are untold. And also the story of women of significance and recognition, because there was a lot of discrimination against them, even on this journey. So we made sure that New York State was the first one to celebrate. We actually had our centennial in 2017. That was when New York State women were able to achieve the right to vote. So we've been having this long extended education campaign to our museums and through the cultural sites and the places where these women lived and walked and worked. And so we've had a coordinated effort to promote them all through our I Love New York campaign as well. I was there this summer. I was there many, many times at Seneca Falls. And it is really a moving experience when you go to the national park that's right there next to the building where they congregated. And the words that were written, the Declaration of Sentiments, modeled after the Declaration of Independence, the words are just dripping with disdain. I mean, these women had it. And you can feel the anger in their words as you're reading them. And if that doesn't fire you up to realize that we have to take this torch from them and make it glow even brighter before we pass it to the next generation. That's what inspires me to keep fighting for rights for women, whether it's family leave issues, they have childcare issues, discrimination in the workplace continues, sexual harassment on college campuses. I did a couple of forums at Syracuse University on that issue. So there's a lot of unfinished business, and every one of us, men and women, have a responsibility to make sure that these women didn't just get us the right to vote, that they eventually got us true equality.
No, you're absolutely right, and the work never ends. But there's a lot of moments to be proud of the progress that we've made so far. And it's always great to see on election day when people go to Mount Hope Cemetery in Rochester and they put their "I voted" stickers on Susan B. Anthony's gravestone. It really shows that they have not forgotten those humble beginnings and the fight that still marches on. You mentioned Syracuse University. Let's segue a little bit to your career with the Orange and Maxwell. As someone who's from Western New York, you clearly knew about Syracuse, but why did you want to study political science, and why was Maxwell the place you chose to achieve your degree?
It's interesting. I mentioned my father who worked at the Bethlehem Steel plant. We had a lot of kids in our family, so you never got time alone with my dad. I mean, it wasn't that he didn't want to, he worked a lot of jobs. He was always busy with his life. And so when it came time to go look at colleges, it was my chance, probably my only time, that I went on a road trip with my dad. And we went around and we looked at a number of colleges, and some had offered me scholarships. And one was a very well-regarded women's college, I'll say. And then we looked at Syracuse and we compared the two as we were driving back. And we walked through the halls of Maxwell and thought a lot about Syracuse. It seemed very big to me. And I said, Dad, what do you think about the two schools? He said, with all due respect to the other college, but I won't even say the name, but he said, that seems like the kind of a college you go to become the wife of a congressman. Syracuse is where you go to become a congressman. And I never thought of myself as even being in that, 17 years old, you think of your daughter as a possible congressman. I never even entertained the thought. But I'll tell you, on the night I was elected in 2011 to Congress and defied all the odds, winning in a Republican seat, my mom and dad were with me. And I told the story, and my dad got tears in his eyes. And I don't think people realize something they say to their child decades and decades earlier sticks with them, that, my dad believed I could be a member of Congress someday. And so Syracuse was it. Syracuse had a nationally recognized school, Maxwell. Of course, everyone knows Maxwell. And the teachers I had there were just first rate. Dr. Michael Sawyer had a big influence on me, and Dr. Robert McClure, and just so many people taught me history, political science, and our role in the responsibility all of us have. I think that's what Syracuse teaches you, that just like I learned at the dinner table, we have a responsibility to the larger community, whether it's the global community, or many of our graduates are making a difference there, or whether it's nationally or in our own communities. And if you're in business, private sector, it doesn't matter. You still can be engaged in supporting the elected officials or just being involved in advocacy. So that's why I went there. And I'll tell you, it was strange for me. I came from this, not a small town, but it was very, very homogeneous. And, I go there and I meet young women from around the world. They wanted to be in Haven, which was the only female dorm. So the parents had to make sure I was in the only all-girl dorm, good Catholic parents. And, my first roommate was from Armenia and my second semester roommate was from Iran. And that was during the Iranian hostage crisis. So let me just tell you, that was a very interesting time to, be a kid who has led a fairly sheltered life. And, it's just culturally meeting all the girls from New York City and Long Island were so sophisticated. And I felt like a little, country bumpkin coming up from suburban Buffalo. So it was a culture shock. It really was. It was a culture shock. And it made me a better person. If I had gone to some of the smaller schools or the schools that were more like, my hometown, not the diversity, I would be a very different person, I think. And so I cherish the diversity that I encountered at Syracuse. And there were just some issues that came up in student, reading them in the Daily Orange about the current student government was not following some rules. And so my roommate and I, went down the hall and got a couple other women. We decided we're going to run for office. We're going to be part of this. And next thing I know, I'm vice president and I'm the one leading the charge. So it wasn't planned. I mean, if you knew me in high school, it would probably not say most likely to, be an elected official. I was pretty shy, quiet. And because I had to work a job 20, 30 hours a week making pizzas, I didn't get a chance to get involved in all the activity. I didn't do sports. I didn't do all the nice resume building things that you can do when you don't have to work so many hours. But I had to work. My family needed some money and I wanted to make sure I could save money for college. So I was a very different person in high school. Syracuse allowed me to kind of shed my image in high school and to become a whole different person. And I blossomed there. And so those experiences were transformative. They truly were.
You mentioned the legendary Bob McClure, and there's so many great faculty at Maxwell. If you had to pick one bit of advice or one life lesson that stood with you still to this day from your time on the Hill, what would that be?
Don't give up, because I took on a lot of challenges that people said we would not accomplish. I'll give you one of them. This is how long ago it was. I know we're doing the Dome Stadium. The Dome Stadium needed a name. We were spending a lot of money building this. I was there my senior year. All the football games were played in the Meadowlands because we were rebuilding the stadium, the Carrier Dome. Well, my student government, and the Daily Orange, the editor of the Daily Orange, Jim Naughton at the time, decided that it was very important for us to have the Dome Stadium named in honor of Ernie Davis, legendary, inspirational, first Black Heisman Trophy. So we decided we're going to make sure the money's there to have it named after Ernie Davis because the university was looking for a name to give. So we literally, I talked to Jim Brown, I'm talking to Larry Zonk, I'm talking to Floyd Little, I'm trying to raise money. We're trying to figure out a way to get this movement with the students to get it named after Ernie Davis. So all of a sudden Carrier Corporation, and coincidentally the chairman of the board of Carrier Corporation was also chairman of the trustees at Syracuse University, very large, intimidating man, Mel Holmes, I'll never forget this. Here I am, a sophomore in college, and word gets out that Carrier Corporation has plunked down $1.6 million and they're going to name it after Carrier Corporation. And we were just shocked. I mean, we were like, wait, corporations can't name this. It has to be named after Ernie Davis. I mean, like, who's going to be inspired by an air conditioning company? So we were just appalled. All of our efforts were in vain. And so when I say never give up, I said, you know what, I'm going to go talk to him. So I didn't have any nice clothes. I had my sneakers and my jeans and probably had, clean shirt. And I went with, I was vice president. I went with Jordan Dale, who was the president. I said, we're going to at least go ask him. And we go in there, intimidating office, huge table, and he's sitting behind. It's like kind of go visiting Oz. I mean, I was really intimidated by this. So I show up anyhow, and I say, Mr. Holmes, it'd be so magnanimous if you would, put down that $1.6 million, but we'll give you a lot of credit and the community will love you if you say that you're raising the money, you're going to give the money to name it after Ernie Davis. I mean, wasn't that going to be great? And it was like, kind of like, Wizard of Oz, like, no, we're not doing that. And, they're mad at us for making them look bad in the community, I think. And I understand that now, but like, oh man. So I also understood you don't give up because we persevered and received a compromise. I learned at age 19, 20 that you can also walk away with something instead of just saying you can't get anything. And what we got out of it was Ernie Davis Legends Field. and the Hall of Fame. And so we made sure that we had some recognition that was not part of the original plan. So when I go back there for a football game, I do have some sense of pride. In fact, when I was there a couple of years ago, I saw Floyd Little, and we talked a little bit about, this long journey way back in the 70s when, we were trying to get this name. So that's my message. I mean, just if there's something that you believe in, you may not always win, but just like, Teddy Roosevelt talked about the man in the arena. I love that, that speech, because it says, I admire the ones who are in the arena getting bloodied and battered. And even if you don't win, you have to still be out there and just maybe something good will come out of it. If it doesn't, at least, you tried.
It's a valuable lesson for all of us to, in whatever field of work you have, to never give up, to keep pursuing your dreams. I do want to segue though real quick to one last question for you. And one of our audience members had submitted this question to us. You seem like such a natural fit for politics. What if you didn't get into politics? What would Kathy Hochul have done as far as a profession, as far as a career?
It's interesting because when I was at Maxwell, my closest friends were all in Newhouse. And I was really intrigued with people that were going into journalism and television. And, my best friends were the editors and the writers at the Daily Orange. So we're always teaming up together against the administration. It was just our job. We had a plot on what we were going to challenge them. Whatever they did, we were going to challenge them. So I think I probably would have gone into journalism or media, something along those lines. Because I think you can either be the ones making the decisions about public policy, or you can be the influencers. And the media is an influencer. And I would have wanted to be in that role to at least give my opinion on what I think should be done, and maybe be an editorial writer someday, or someone in the media along those lines. So, there's a great confluence. My best friends, back even when I lived in Washington and worked for Senator Moynihan on Capitol Hill, my best friends were the writers at the Washington Post and other people, because I always gravitate toward people in that field because they're always so aware. The conversations are great because they're engaged and know everything that's happening. So I would probably say that's where I would have ended up.
Oh, listen, next time you happen to approach a milestone for the media, you had your 500th media appearance. If you get to 1,000, give us a call. Let us know. We'd love to be the ones to have that honor of bringing you back for another conversation, because it's really been a fun time getting to share your story here with us on this virtual conversation. I know you have a tight schedule you have to get off to, so we really appreciate you making the time to share your feedback and give us a little insight into what it's like to be the lieutenant governor, and more importantly, to be someone who bleeds orange and bleeds Bill's Mafia as well. So thank you for your insights and your expertise today, Lieutenant Governor.
Well, thank you, John, and to everybody who zoomed in today, thank you. And you are part of a large, amazing network of fascinating, diverse individuals who are making a difference in countless ways. And I'm proud to be part of it. So thank you, everybody. Have a great night.